It's a bit like being in Syria. Unexpected allies, unwanted opponents, some of the people wholly incomprehensible, and on top of that, a very grave difficulty in working out who to bomb and who not to bomb, and whether to bomb anybody at all. I can't myself work it out. Jane was calling earlier on for herself to be allowed to marry in church. I believe that she will achieve this objective. In fact, I've long felt that we will know that our society has finally disappeared up its own contradictions when the lesbian Archbishop of Canterbury marries the lesbian Archbishop of York in Canterbury Cathedral. It will come. I'm sorry, well, I'm so sorry I'm not being heckled, by the way. I don't know quite where they've all been. They were handing out leaflets outside saying all kinds of untrue things about me, which I was anxious to correct. No, I don't need to bother. The terms of the motion seem to me to have been largely ignored this evening. I don't blame people for ignoring them, but they have been. No one has even bothered to define recognition. And it seems to me that the whole point about recognition is that it is a recognition by the state of a territory controlled by somebody else and not by itself. This is not a matter of the state taking over marriage. It is a matter of the state recognizing that there exists in the country private life. Not as a right handed down by the state, as in European conventions and UNHCR clauses, but as something which exists, a piece of ancient liberty which we possess, in which we conduct our private life. And I'd like to take as my text some words by D.H. Lawrence, who most of you will probably think of as the author of Lady Chatterley's Lover and the apostle of sexual liberation. Nonetheless, this is what he wrote in his essay, Apropos Lady Chatterley's Lover. It is marriage, perhaps, which has given man the best of his freedom, given him his little kingdom of his own within the big kingdom of the state, given him his foothold of independence on which to stand and resist an unjust state. Man and wife, a king and queen with one or two subjects and a few square yards of territory of their own. This really is marriage. It is a true freedom because it is a true fulfillment for man, woman, and children. And he then warned, make marriage in any serious degree unstable, dissoluble, destroy the permanency of marriage, and the church falls. Witness the enormous decline of the Church of England, the reason being that the church is established upon the element of union in mankind. Break it, and you will have to go back to the overwhelming dominance of the state, which existed before the Christian era. The Roman state was all-powerful. I think that this was a prophetic and extremely important piece of work. And it was prophetic, so much so that the prophecy was fulfilled not long after D.H. Lawrence's actually rather appalling book was freed for general publication. In the late 1960s, when almost every major Western country passed legislation which destroyed marriage. It's almost a waste of time for us here to be discussing this because of what happened. Marriage had previously been a contract between two people. A very important element of it being that it was lifelong and there was no breach to it once it was made. It did mean, whatever Germain said, it did mean till death us do part. It did mean so long as ye both shall live. And this was very much the case in the England in which I grew up. What the laws passed, the Divorce Law Reform Act of 1968 in this country, similar legislation in the United States, what it meant was that if one party to that marriage, one party to that solemn mutual oath of lifelong partnership, if you like, if one party decided that they were no longer prepared to hold to that oath, the state would burst into their home, if necessary, and drag away the person who wanted to keep the oath. Anyway, this is an extraordinary position. In any other area of law, if two people make an agreement to do something, to sign a contract, and one of them breaks it, they go to the court and the state to enforce it. But since 1968, what the state has done is actually actively intervene to force that contract apart and to break it. This is an enormous interference and interruption in private life by the state. It's had huge consequences, which I shall come to in a moment. But fundamentally what it has meant is that the state's interference in private life has grown immensely, and the one institution, hated, by the way, by the Soviet Union and the communist countries before the fall of the Berlin Wall, the one institution which actually stood outside the state and provided a huge area of private life and independence, has been under immense attack. It's not surprising, if you examine the statistics of marriage carefully now, that so many people no longer get married at all. It is increasingly common for people to cohabit without marrying. It's very common for those marriages which do exist to break up in divorce. Many of the marriages which do take place are remarriages of divorced persons. There is actually a very, very serious, enduring decline in marriage in any Western country. And why shouldn't there be? What advantage is there in it for either of the parties if it cannot actually be supported by and will not be supported by the law, if the law actively intervenes to destroy it? Not just to destroy it, but in several important judgments which date back to the 1940s, it's also the case now that any form of blame against the person who breaks up the marriage is abolished when it comes to the distribution of the marital property, particularly the house, and indeed who gets the care of the children. There is no longer in English law any reason why anybody can go to court and say, look, I am the wounded party here, I should get the house. I am the deserted person here, I should get the house. I am the deserted person here, I should be the person who looks after the children. The law takes no account of it at all. You're simply left on your own. The law barges into your house and will ultimately send you to prison if you resist the law's absolutely fervent attempts to make you break your contract. This is where we are, and it's gone even further because, again, forgive me for quoting, but it's so important. Mrs. Justice Hale, as she then was, now the first woman on the Supreme Court, did much in her legal career to remove the idea of blame from divorce law. And in 1982, again prophetically, in an article called The Utility of Marriage as a Legal Institution, she pointed out whether it would have been possible to remove the inequality between the sexes, improve the protection given to the weak, and at the same time promote lasting marriage, we shall never know. Instead, the efforts of English law to remove the defects of the marital package deal have succeeded not only in virtually destroying whatever value it has as a stabilizing or restraining force, but also in an ever closer approximation of the legal consequences of marriage and extramarital cohabitation. In such circumstances, the piecemeal erosion of the distinction between marriage and non-marital cohabitation may be expected to continue. Logically, we have already reached a point at which, rather than discussing which remedies should now be extended to the unmarried, we should be considering whether the legal institution of marriage continues to serve any useful purposes. That from one of the cleverest and most far-seeing judges and lawyers in our country. Marriage in this country is legally dead. It exists as a ghost. And what anybody proposes to do to defend it, I have no idea. It would be nice, I have to say, because of the enormous importance of it as the foundation of a free society in which people can bring up their children as they wish, teach them the ideas that they wish to pass on to them, pass on, in fact, everything which was given to them by their forebears, and continue this as a society rather than just a collection of people living in the same place. It would be nice if that could have continued. It would be nice if the state hadn't mounted a 40-year assault on it. It would be nice if anybody purporting to be conservative had at any time since this terrible mistake was made tried to undo it, but nobody has, and nobody will. If you feel like it, vote against the motion. It's a good thing to do. It won't make any difference. I have no other point to make.